Another minute, another hour.
History of the United States. Wow, that's really ambitious.
A little light reading.
So Jodie, I remember hearing about this film back in like 2008 when it was at the top of the blacklist with
Right.
Steve Carell attached. How did it, fall into your hands and become what we're seeing now?
Yeah, it was Steve Carell and Jay Roach was directing, and which, a team that went on to do Dinner with Schmucks, and they'd done things before together. They didn't really do any development on the screenplay. They didn't really talk about changes in the screenplay, so all they had really done was try to figure out the window of when they were going to do this movie together, and they could never figure that out. So my gut is that they saw it as a much more comedic film. I just assume they would have, with that team, I'm sure they would have. When I found out about it and I read it, I said, whenever, if anything happens to those two, would you please call me? And that's kind of what happened.
When you read it, did you ever think that the character Walter Black could actually be played by a woman instead?
Never did. Never did. No, I didn't. I think that there is something about this particular man's spiritual crisis has everything: blue-collar family, relationship with dad, son to father relationship. I think I don't know. I'd have to rewrite the whole thing, and then it would be about a mother-son, and I don't think it would be the same to me.
Okay.
There are movies I've made, like Flight Plan,
Right.
which was a men's role, and I thought that was a really good idea to change that from a man to a woman. In fact, I think it would have been a horrible movie with a guy,
Okay.
but not this one.
Not really.
Yeah, this film was much more serious than I was expecting.
Yeah.
Did you do a lot of changing, or?
No, there were a few changes, but I think that was how I saw it. I mean, I saw it from the beginning as a drama, and I wanted to work backwards from that. How do I achieve a tone that has quirkiness and lightness? It's a higher, it's a concept. If a guy puts a weapon on a hand, that allows that kind of absurdity and that fable quality, but is able to evolve into a real drama that really talks about depression and about a spiritual crisis. And in order to do that, I had to sort of tailor back the comedy from the beginning, and every single choice, whether visual or color, framing, had to serve the drama that it was becoming.
You talked about the father-son relationship. Anton really gave a very layered performance, something I thought was one of his best to date. How different was it to kind of, from a director's standpoint, coax a younger actor to give a very mature performance?
Well, he's been around for a long time. He's
Yes,
made
he
a lot of
has.
movies as a child actor, and so it wasn't like dealing with a child
Mhm.
performer. He's 19 years old, but he's very intelligent, very intellectual, sends huge memos about his character, has very big ideas about what to do. I think there were, he's young, so there were a few things he likes. He likes hundreds of takes, and he likes to go off into crazy directions, and, one more, and then the last 8 takes are unusable. And of course, the first 4 are fantastic. He has those habits that young people often have where they overthink things because they have so much energy and they don't trust their instincts as much, so they overthink things in the beginning, and we had to pare some of that down. But honestly, he's extraordinary, and I think he came to the table with such a great performance. And it was a challenge to keep 2 stories alive that are 2 separate stories alive, and have one not hurt the pacing of the other, to have one be as interesting as the other, and to have them inform each other was in 2 very separate worlds.
Kind of going with the father-son relationship, how did you take this very young, not very, but a child actor and create a very, emotional relationship that really resonates?
With Riley, the little
with
guy?
With Riley and Mel.
I don't know. I mean, that kid had never done anything before. And he's gone on to do some commercials now, but he's never done anything before. And we had a really hard time finding a kid, and originally the kid was supposed to be at least 9 years old, because he's handling power tools, and he's handling woodworking equipment, and what father would put their son in a situation where he's going to hammer his hand off, So we grappled with that, and I kept going, he needs to be 9, but I just wish that he was a really mature 9. And we couldn't find anyone, and then this kid came on. He's just so cute. I was like, he's so cute! I realized that there was something to be said of the power of him really believing that the puppet's talking, kind of wanting to believe it, because he lost his dad a long time ago, and now his dad's back. So you had to have somebody who believably could, in a wide-eyed way, really go with the puppet. And so we opted for a kid who was really quite young. And he's tall, but he was really quite young. And he wasn't even quite 7. I think he was just turning 7 on the film.
What was that accent that the Beaver was doing? Where is
His
that?
English accent,
Yeah.
part Geico guy, and it's a London accent. I don't remember whether it's east or south, but Michael Caine both with On Speed. It was always an English accent in the original script, and there was something to be said, I think, for having the puppet be everything that Walter is not. So the puppet is blue-collar, Walter is not. The puppet is confident, Walter is not. The puppet is really didactic and very to the point and makes decisions quickly, and Walter is stuck and can't. And the vitality of that Beaver, and all of us, that sent us to that particular accent.
He was a very manly Beaver.
Yes, he was.
I think he had an extra Y chromosome.
Yeah, maybe, very manly Beaver he was, and lusty and all of that. I mean, and we sat down and really talked about that and put them to two sides and said, who is the alter ego, and what function does he have?
We were kind of talking about the timing of the movie and how a couple of us scenes kind of saw Charlie Sheen type things, like with the interviews with Matt Lauer and the manicness of it. Do you think that's going to help the film? Do you see it at all yourself, or?
I have no idea.
Right.
It's not my job. I mean, it's the wonderful thing about making movies is that you have this product to show, and you can say, this is everything that I love and believe in and that I think is true. And I think that state of mind is true, even though it's a fable. It is a fable. I mean, it's a very truthful path. That whole piece where he goes on the Today Show and talks about, you're telling me I'm crazy. Let me tell you what crazy is. Crazy is pretending to be happy your whole life and being asleep. And
It's a very powerful scene.
I think it's very true.
Yeah.
And I think it's, that spiritual crisis is one I feel like I've gone through. And it's one that I think is really rooted in modern life, modern American life.
Great Peter Finch moment, that scene.
Yeah.
Meredith Black seems to be the opposite of Madeline White.
Yes!
One of my favorite characters by
Thank you. Me too. I wish there was a whole movie about her.
Me too.
I know.
And I like to connect the dots with artists in their
Sure.
movies, like Clever Girl, S.R. Haddon, and Hannibal Lecter, both say Clever Girl.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
But Meredith couldn't be clever with all this insanity around her, even though she tried her hardest.
Well, I think she's a really true character. I mean, she's somebody who is the audience's point of view. And, the Beaver couldn't be the audience's point of view because he's crazy. So we had to find somebody who could anchor the film and anchor Walter's drama and really give you a perspective on him that was the same as the audience. So the audience starts out saying, well, maybe that's not so bad. This is good for the little kid, right? This is good for my kid. And they go with it for a while until they start seeing how absurd it is and how it starts disintegrating the family, and then start seeing the ramifications, and especially ramifications on her children. And that's where she draws the line, which is, not my sons. You're not going to take my sons down that route. They're not going to watch their father be scarred by watching their father lose his mind. And that's the point where the audience leaves Walter in some ways, and where she leaves Walter. So Meredith is the point of view of the audience.
In some of your recent interviews, you talked about how making personal movies is important to you. How was it for this movie? Why was it so special for you to make this one?
Wow, so many reasons. I've only made 3 movies as a director, and all 3 of them are about people in a spiritual crisis and evolving through that spiritual crisis to become more evolved people. Life or death moments for them that are not about giant things. They're about small things. Leonard Tate, I think, 7-year-old boy grappling with, wow, I have a prodigious head and I have a prodigious heart. Do I have to choose between the two? Do I have to give up my mother in order to embrace my teacher? Do I have to give up my entire life of the mind in order to love my mom and be cared for? And I think those are genuine questions, and the resolution of them, the balance of bringing those 2 things together is what allows him to become an evolved man. It's different from other men of his generation. And I think that will be true of Walter Black as well. He's a man who's going through a spiritual crisis that takes him to the brink of death. And he feels like he has 2 choices. Life sentence, where he's asleep his whole long life, or a death sentence where he jumps off a cliff. And what he realizes is that there's this, I want to live. How can I live? How do I live? Well, you put a puppet on your hand, and live and live. And, he opts for that. And that survival tool takes him, survives. He survives through a survival tool. But the survival tool will kill you eventually. And he has to kill the survival tool in order to evolve into somebody different. I think this is a really personal film for me for those reasons. I think, that those are, as a fable, that's true in my life as well.
Now, you've worked with some amazing directors, Scorsese,
Yep.
Polanski, Woody Allen,
David
Josh
Fincher,
Newman.
Adrian Lyne, Bocce Roll.
Yourself?
Spike
Who inspires you as a director?
Well, the two directors I think I've learned the most from are the two most opposite directors I've worked with. I mean, David Fincher on one hand, who's the greatest technician I've ever worked with, will ever work with, and knows more about making movies and knows more about my job, everybody's job, so planned and thought out and meticulously, thought. But I take from that and learn from that, but my filmmaking, I don't do it the same way. He does 110 takes in order to get it absolutely right. And I will serve him, but when I do my movies, I prepare as meticulously as he does, and I only do 2 takes, and allow the thing to happen in front of me. Neil Jordan, on the other hand, I think I learned so much from him because he's a poet, and he's a stream of consciousness poet at that. So, even though he does prepare meticulously for a film by immersing himself in the story and in the thoughts and the feelings of the characters, you never know what's going to happen when he gets there, because he'll get into space and he'll see the people and he'll see the faces and he'll start asking himself questions like, what if 35 taxis drove by all at the same time? And then suddenly somebody's scrambling to get taxis, everybody's on the phone and calling because that occurred to him in that moment. He allows himself that space. So those are two people that I feel like I've learned the most from recently, and they're completely opposites and different from me.
How far into the screenplay did you want Mel as Walter?
What do you mean?
Like, when reading the screenplay, like, how far did you say, I want Mel as his character?
Oh, to play the part?
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much immediately, as soon as I jumped on. I mean, I had to react pretty quickly because there were a lot of actors that were really wanting to play the part, and if they had, it would have taken the film into a completely different direction. I mean, I know better than anybody the impact of casting on a film, and an actor means everything to it, and there's not so much you can change about their performance once they've made a decision about what path they're going to go in. And so I was really adamant about getting Mel on immediately, so it was a 24-hour decision that he made.
What made you jump on as an actor?
As an actor?
Yeah.
When I cast Mel, I thought, who am I going to get to play the wife, and who's going to be able to anchor the film and the drama the way I needed it to, and who would believably be somebody who's loved him for that long, and who is that going to be? And I just thought it would be so much. I also know who he is professionally and how he works, and I knew that he would be very easy to direct, and I didn't have to. He wouldn't be put off by having an actor-director across from him, and he'd know that I wasn't going to hurt him. But I mean, he wouldn't. He of all people knows that I'm not going to hurt him, and I'm not going to make him do something bad for his career or give him bad tips about his performance. I think that he trusts me, and so I felt like I knew that being an actor opposite him wouldn't hurt the performance; it would make it better.
What is your response to people who are calling this his quote-unquote comeback?
I don't know. He doesn't need to come back. I mean, as I've said to him many times, the only reason for you to ever act again is because something moves you and you love it, and he doesn't need it. I mean, he's proven himself 1,000 times as an actor, and he's proven himself financially in other ways. I mean, he doesn't need that identity, and it brings him a lot of pain. So the only reason to do this is because he loves it, and I think that's why he did this movie. He hadn't worked in a long time. He'd done Edge of Darkness, and there was a lot that he saw in that. He hadn't worked for a long time as an actor before that. What I think his real goals are, and what I'm excited about for him, is to see who he is, who he continues to be as a director. I think he's one of the greatest directors that we have for a guy who's only made, he's only made 4 movies or 5 movies. I mean, extraordinary films and he wrote them. He wrote most of them, so it's not a fluke He's an extraordinary storyteller, and that's really, I think, what I look forward to the most, and I think that's what he's looking forward to right now. I think he's really looking forward to directing.
And we can do one, maybe two more questions.
Speaking of looking forward, you're nursing a science fiction story?
Yeah, it's Neil Blomkamp from District 9, and Matt Damon is the other actor, and I start shooting mid-August, but I'm only on it for 3 weeks, so I'm not the star.
How was the Polanski film?
It was good. We're all done. Yeah, all done.
When you were a child star, you must have been around a lot of great directors. Did that inspire you to become a director?
I don't know how many great directors I was around. Well, Martin Scorsese for sure, and Adrian Lyne maybe, Alan Parker. Aside from them, I'm trying to think.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, I remember being like 6 or 7 years old the first time that I worked with an actor-director on a TV show. Of course, Buffetti's father was Bill Bixby, and I just was like, oh wow, I didn't know they let actors direct. And I said, oh, this is what I'm gonna do. And I think from that moment on, I always sort of had my eye on that, and I paid attention. I was always paying attention to, why did they put the camera there, and what does that mean, and how does editing work, and what does this lens mean? It's something that really spoke to me.
Going forward, do you see yourself more drawn to directing, or are you going to always be anchored into?
I can't imagine quitting acting and making a big effort to quit acting, because it's something I've done my whole life, and 45 years. I mean, why would I quit now? But I don't think that I'll act out as much in the next 10 years as I have, and I really feel like I have a lot to learn as a director, and I'm excited about it. I'm excited about who I am as a director. And I think it's an opportunity to really talk about what I'm fascinated by more. That was really badly constructed. It's an opportunity to have more of my identity on screen.
Any thoughts of maybe moving into television? A lot of actresses have made that jump.
I did television for years and years and years. Sure, I would. I don't rule it out. I can't. TV is hard, and drama TV is impossible. It's way harder than making features. Much longer hours, much bigger commitment. I don't see myself doing drama TV. Yeah, I mean, the great thing about cable now is that it gives you an opportunity to do stuff you can't do in features anymore. And with all the new technologies, I think that there's going to be a very blurry line between,